actually an incredibly important hearing, specifically held to address anti-Semitism. And, we will never address it, we will never fix it unless we have people on both sides making true representations. I was very surprised to have one witness blame our recent president for anti-Semitism when college campuses were overtaken and Jewish students had criminal acts perpetrated against them under a different administration. But I also thought it was interesting that we blamed the right for not admitting anti-Semitism is real when you have heard every one of us say, what are we going to do to address it? In Florida, and I appreciate the compliment for our universities, we did not see the incredibly dangerous, reckless, offensive, criminal behavior that we saw on college campuses around the nation, but that doesn't happen by accident. As soon as we saw this popping up, I was Attorney General. Leadership in Tallahassee was very clear. This is a law and order state. It will not happen. We communicated directly with our presidents. And not only that, I communicated directly with our chiefs of police, instructed them on the laws, the criminal laws that we were seeing, that people should be arrested for. And we specifically communicated with our state attorneys and said, if they are arrested, the last thing you should do is advocate that they get right back out and go right back to the university. As we saw in other states, this is proactive ways to stop this behavior before it destroys any semblance of sanity and peace and structure and free speech among a university. And so I'm really interested in some of the statements that maybe we give additional funding to stop this behavior. I think that's incredibly insane. In fact, I heard Senator Lee talk about, are we using all of the tools at DOJ to stop this? I think maybe we should examine, since federal funding flows to universities, maybe we should examine when universities are accused of allowing violations of the Civil Rights Act, and maybe when there are court opinions that actually make findings to suggest that has actually happened, maybe we should start clawing back federal funding that's already been given to them. That's a thought. And maybe, just maybe, the thing that happened last week where the university president asked permission in the middle of a protest of the protesters if he could go to the bathroom, maybe that wouldn't be happening if he thought maybe his federal funding might be clawed back. I was just wondering what you thought about that, Ms. Cohab.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think that something has to be held over the university's heads, because unless something happens and something changes and there's actual consequences, why would you change your actions? Look, I don't think the overwhelming majority of administrators are inherently anti-Semitic. I think they're lazy. And I think that they know that fighting anti-Semitism takes work, and it's not something that's easy. And yes, you're going to make some people angry, especially the kinds of students that you've been educating to be angry about everything. If you're admitting the kind of student who takes over buildings, don't be surprised when the kind of students take over buildings led by their very professors. That's the thing. We keep saying that there's an issue in higher education, but we have our head in the sand as to how to fix it. I think that consequences are absolutely necessary. Filing my complaint was enough to get NYU to the table for a settlement, but that wasn't even close to changing what happened. After October 7th, you still saw encampments at NYU, and they still had another case against them. I think that the law changes very slowly, and that the only way to hold people accountable is to make sure that there are consequences on the other side.
And Ms. Lewin, I'll ask you same question. Do you believe if we had additional tools provided by the government that allowed for a clawback of federal funds if universities were found to have allowed or even facilitated civil rights violation, do you think that would help in combating anti-Semitism on campuses? And you can answer briefly.
Absolutely, Senator Moody. I think that what we need most is to hold the universities accountable. The law is a very powerful motivator. And what we've seen is that just the threat of withholding the funds or clawing back the funds has already motivated universities to act. And I would suggest to you, quite frankly, that university administrators, when we've negotiated settlements with them, some of them are actually very relieved relieved to be able to point to the law and to be able to say, we now have to do this because the law requires us to do it. And it gives them the backbone, which they otherwise seem to lack, to actually stand up and push back against the Jew hatred that's happening on their campus. So it's absolutely necessary to hold their feet to the fire and to impose these rules and show that violating them and violating Title VI has consequences.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today on this really supremely important topic. I think all of us on this panel were horrified